Right. Hey, Chanel, good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
How is your summer?
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. Love
Mm.
Swedish summer. It's beautiful, and we had a little bit of rain, so it's not too hot.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Wow, great. Good to hear that. Good to hear that. I think this is one of my best summer ever because for the first time I am not feeling cold in summer. So the weather is being nice to me, and I'm happy to enjoy that. But thank you for coming and showing up. We are going to enjoy and talk about serious but interesting things that is very dear to both of our hearts. So yeah. So regarding the topic, which is the engaging for an equitable playing field, and we are hearing it from women of color. So, of course, our experiences are different, and how we view equity might be different from how other people in different groups would also feel or experience equity. So that is why I think it is really important that we delve deep into these particular discussions and see how we can jaw and see how best we can make things work in our favor also, of course, without exploiting others. So you being as an illustrator and with a Jamaican background and in UK and now in Sweden, I'm just curious to know more about Chanel Richardson. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I've done art all my life. I grew up in the UK as a Black British kid. And that was already a very interesting thing because I grew up outside of London. So
Mm-hmm.
London is a very multicultural city. Like a lot of people will say, is one of the most multicultural cities in the world,
Mm-hmm.
which I totally can get behind. I wasn't living there. I was living in Kent, which is like an hour away. And now it's quite diverse in that sort of place geographically. But when I was first growing up, I think it was a bit, it's not that there weren't black people, there were, but you still stood out a little bit. It wasn't nearly as mostly white dominated as when my mum first moved there. So I'm very thankful that it wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
it gets more and more culturally diverse. Um, but now I'm comparing that to moving to Sweden, you know. So it's a very interesting sort of transition. And you see sort of like different things culturally.
Mm-hmm.
And I much prefer Sweden. I will just throw that out there right now. But in terms of navigating the sort of artistic creative space, it's very different in both places. Um, so I think it's it's one thing to sort of like, just be navigating the business world as a sort of employee or something a little bit more, I don't know, like commonplace. I don't know how to really explain it, but when it comes to creative work anyway, I think it's slightly with its own sort of like perceptions of what it means to be an illustrator or an artist or a creative job or something like that. There is already sort of a discrepancy there. So that I would say has sort of translated also to here. Um, and so it's quite an interesting thing because the sort of challenges that I thought I would face are slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
Because navigating the business world in the UK and navigating it here in Sweden, very, very different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, right. So how would you assess the differences in the business landscape with regards to illustration, and especially when it comes to someone with a woman of color in these
Mm.
areas? How would you rate it?
It's a very interesting one because I'll admit, honestly, the first word that springs to mind is a little bit intimidating. Sweden operates very differently, I would say, than how it works in the UK. Um, I think I do a lot of sort of online events and go to a lot of networking with, international networking and UK networking. But Sweden, networking here in Sweden is a very different beast. It feels very much like you need to know someone in order to get in those spaces. And if you don't know them, then, it's sort of like, why are you here? And I don't think it's like a thing of like maybe color would come into it. I do also think it's just a cultural difference, such an ingrained like sort of like way of sort of being here in Sweden, because I do think that Swedes are a lot more, just keep to myself, like who are you? Why are we talking? And in the UK it's like, okay, so this is me, blah blah blah, da 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 da.
Yeah.
You could just talk
Yeah.
to whoever. But here it is very much just like, why are you, why is that connection being made? Is there a mutual like thing? What is the point? And so honestly, when it comes to sort of networking, I feel like it's been very meager, the opportunities, let alone, just getting into any group, let alone getting into a group that's full of people that are representing people like me or resembling me, or I haven't even found really a creative network or a Black business women group or something, that sort of represents my demographic. In the UK, that's in abundance. So it is a very interesting thing. It's like the playing field is leveled, but it's elevated because now it feels like the bar of like getting in is very much who you know. So that's very interesting.
That sounds like a very familiar line in some parts of Africa. And it's quite interesting to know that in a subtle way and in a subtle manner, it happens here also in a developed country like Sweden. It's quite an interesting discovery.
Yeah, really.
Yes, yes. So when you were talking, you said something about the issue of color playing in. I mean, even when you find yourself in a place, I think I have found that I have experienced that one or two occasions. Of course, when I go to places, and usually I'm either the only African Black woman there, or I am the few amongst a few Blacks. And most of even the few Blacks with me are guys.
Yeah.
So sometimes it is okay. That is when the social psychology comes in. So people do not really know exactly how to even address you, walk up to you, socialize with you, because of course, let's just be honest about some of these things. I think it's because of the general perception or stereotypical perceptions that people have it for people of color. Until you start talking, and then until you start addressing issues, then people will start, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. But this is my experience. But for you, how does it really stand out?
Yeah. Oh, that is such a yeah, it's on the nose. I think, a funny thing is that where I grew up in Kent, this was such a common occurrence for me, being the one Black person or one of up to three.
And with an accent also.
Right. It's just like, oh my gosh. And it's just like, okay, like, and I think in a weird way, because I studied in Bournemouth in the UK. which is a seaside town, beautiful town. There was always stuff going on, very student town because the campus was like, I mean, it's kind of like Uppsala. You have just the campus all spread across the town, and you have different campuses all around Bournemouth. But I remember talking to my friend who was also a Black woman, and she was just like, it's so white. If I can say that, like, it's so white. Because she grew up in London, where there's so many, just like different races in general. And a lot of more Black people in sort of like, ratio where she was living. She saw people like her all the time. And I remember her being like, see, it's just so white. And I'm like, is it? So I'm so used to it. And then I come here to Sweden and it's like, oh yeah, it really is just me. Like it really is just me. Like in the UK, it would be like, oh yeah, no, I will spot maybe one or two, but yeah, here it genuinely is that. And I think and now it's probably a bit of a sweeping generalization, but I'm only going based on my experience, that it feels like, in a way, the how do I put this? The prejudices that may come with certain people. In the UK, it's very much on your sleeve. You see how people look at you, how they might address you, the microaggressions, the stuff like that. It's just like, okay, you get what I mean? They think they're being subtle, they're not being subtle, right? In Sweden, somebody can be just chatting to you. And then it's only when you hear them in relation to talking to somebody else, or someone else is saying something that they said, that it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I wonder why they would say that. So it's a very like interesting thing. It's like, and I mean, it really is noticeable, the ratio, the ratio of sort of like seeing people like you, because I can go into literally a room full of like, my husband's bowling club, like it's, easily, 50 or 100 or so people, and I'm still the only Black person. So it's really
that is the Black
like really
privilege.
noticeable. Yeah. And sometimes I think I can be a bit naive, because I kind of, that's how I navigate it, because sometimes I just block that out as much as I can, just to get on with it, so that I don't pick up on things. And that's how I guard myself. It might not be super healthy, but it's only until I sort of like sit there and it's just like, oh. And if somebody's acting a bit strange to me, it's like, oh right, yeah, that's the thing.
Yes. Wow. I think it's something that you cannot afford but notice it.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to understand why and how come that is. And do you think that usually with a little, so we are just taking it from the aspect of the networking community being so meager and pretty much like, yes, who takes you there, or if you don't know anyone, yes, find your way out, and you can understand how people can accept you, or they will respond to you when you try to say hello, or this is a very cultural or Nordic trait that we have all come to appreciate and navigate. Yes, but do you think that how do you think this has a direct correlation with the field of illustration in being diverse and moving on to being inclusive and being equitable, and ultimately having a form of a representation and belonging? How do you navigate or respond to that analysis?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, everything's related, I think, because illustration, like the kind of way that I work is I really want to get what my client wants. That I want to get into their head. It's a very personal thing. Like some people are, commissioning me for family portraits and, their love project, passion project that they've had in their head for years, and I'm helping them realize it. So I need to have that personal connection. And I can't do that if I can't get into the space where these people are. And I think, touching on the sort of like the bar of entry, I think business is seen as a very different thing, like running your own business. In the UK, it's pretty easy. It's why I still have my business in the UK and I shut it down in Sweden, right? Because in the UK, I want to start a company, get a certificate
Go
of
for it.
corporation, boom, here you go. Do you need like setup capital? You don't need setup capital. You can bootstrap it if you want. You can do that here, but it's such a different beast. It's so many hoops you have to jump over and all of this stuff. And it's like, oh, you start up a business because you think you're gonna make money right there. And usually people sort of have that thing, but the bar is, how do I say it? The bar is lower, or at least, the sort of like just getting in there. Yeah, it's like accessible, and it's just like, okay, yeah, you've got your side hustle and you're actually making a little bit of cash. That's a business. Here it's very much like, okay, so you're making over blah, 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 blah in revenue. I'm just like, who? No. And it's like so it's an interesting thing, being a creative. It's like I fall into that stereotype, the starving artist. I'm not paying, uh, over 1,000 Swedish crowns just to go to a meeting for 2 hours. Like, absolutely not. Especially if I don't even know if it's going to be good or if I'm going to vibe with people there. Okay, I don't have that kind of money to burn, just pee into the air. So yeah, I think it has a direct like correlation, definitely. Um, definitely. Yeah. And you can't even get some certain funding as a creative business, which I didn't know until I obviously tried to get some funding. And they're like, oh, so you're an illustrator. It's like, yeah, as in you do art and, it's a creative business. I was like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, we can't support that. And it's like, why? It's a creative business. It just doesn't. And actually, I found that is a thing that comes up a few times, which I never knew. So yeah, it's a very it's an interesting thing. There definitely is a difference.
That's an interesting discovery there. So in that case, if, for instance, you having the challenge in maybe like first getting into the job market to even be commissioned to do a project, that is one, and two, also trying to access funding. Do you think then that is a direct reflection of inequitable playing field for a professional like you who has practiced this all her life since childhood? We are talking about decades here, or even if we want to even rule out the fact that, okay, you did it since you were a child, and let's say for the last decade in your adult age. Do you think this has been a contributing factor in the lack of inequitable playing field, especially as a woman of color?
Yeah. I mean, I've been saying it for so long that I think that but when it comes to freelance art, the thing is, when commissioning a piece of art, that's a luxury, right?
Exactly.
you know, it's a luxury.
It
And
is.
yeah, you have people every single day
Mm.
charging pennies and barely getting paid for it,
Yeah.
for something that they've been practicing on, like you say, in some cases decades, in my case decades.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's literally just like, what do you get for it? Oh, maybe you can get another pack of ramen noodles. It's like, it's very interesting. That I think now it's even sort of worsened, obviously, with like the change in technological climate. Obviously, we have
Yeah.
more ways to exploit creatives now, and
Mm-hmm.
take stuff that isn't theirs, and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. It's even more so like people who are like me have to tell people, actually, yeah, this isn't like a free thing, and it's not just an easy thing, and it's
Yeah.
not just about pushing a button and getting it.
Mm-hmm.
It's about me doing a skill that
Mm-hmm.
you can't do to help
Mm-hmm.
you. Just
Exactly.
as anything else, you know, just as
Exactly.
accounting or building or plumbing.
Exactly.
And yeah, you know, in the creative field, and we see it so much time. We had the writers' strike. We have Disney must pay, which is hashtagged
Mm-hmm.
right now, with people that aren't getting royalties for their work. It's just a plague,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, in the creative field right now. And it's it's very strange because I don't really know the way to combat it besides going on the offensive and just being like, it costs this much
Mm-hmm.
and it costs this much. Like, there's nothing else that I can do for you. If you want to go
Right.
to somebody else, then go to somebody else. Because there's always
Yes.
going to be somebody who wants to do it cheaper, who's doing it as a hobby, who doesn't need to live off it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, that's just the sum total of it is a very hard thing to sort of weasel out, but there is such inequality in pay. And actually, I've noticed more and more that Black women of color,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they fall into, you know, other sort of like minority groups, like part of the LGBTQA community,
Mm-hmm.
this and that, disabled,
Mm-hmm.
the people that won't get access to as many things in society
Right.
are turning to the things that they can do and that
Yes.
they have access to, which is
Exactly.
creative stuff, right? You can, you know, they might be able to write, they might not be able to necessarily be in, you know, running around in a restaurant and this and that. So they need to do, you know, a side hustle because their body won't allow it or something like that. What do they turn to? Something that they do have access to, those remote jobs,
Yeah.
that side income,
Yeah.
doing art. And so I think this is a very like direct sort of correlation because I do think that especially people like me
Mm-hmm.
have art as like a side hustle and
Mm-hmm.
something to give them income. And I think it's a very interesting thing that it's also something that is pooped on from a
Exactly.
high, you know, from a high point
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
by corporates and individuals alike.
Exactly. Exactly. Wow. This is a really
Sorry,
strong
a bit of a rant.
this is a strong point you have made, especially with the point of the minority groups, even as like a black woman in a larger dominated field or community or society or even geographical jurisdictions. And this makes me also think back and looking at the aspect of disability also, because at a point, this why I'm saying that is when you migrate, you have everything sorted out for you in your back in your country, and then you decide with all your skills, one, your education, two, your social network, three, your experience, four, family, everything is now left behind. But let's just narrow it down to maybe like your skill, experience, education, and expertise. And then you find yourself in a different country, like the Nordics,
Mm.
and then that is when you realize, you are a little bit disadvantaged and you are disabled, so to say. So how do you now start life again?
Yeah.
When it is quite a challenge to even navigate, less social connections, less social groups, as you were saying, even less network possibilities. And this networking possibilities is the currency, as it's a currency for a new person or a new immigrant, or even like a new person in a new place will sort of like trade with. So in a way, you feel very disabled. So now you have to now look into your heart. You now have to fall back into the skill that you have harnessed all this while and start as a therapeutic thing, and just go on with it and start working around it to feel good and to revisit the fact that you are actually creative and you are industrious and you can actually make things happen. But then again, the outside barriers are also lifted. If you want to take it a step or a notch further to maybe set up as a business or even a sole proprietor or and a freelancer. So this is a really strong point. I got a little bit emotional about that, but this is what disability could also translate as.
Yes, absolutely.
Aside the physical limitations and all that, socially, people could, or we could all be disabled, especially when you find yourself in majority-dominated society, when you fall in the minority. But how? what would you say? Even as to be sincere, I have seen less illustrations here. And how do you even think that even in the corporate world, how do you feel that there is even a representation of an artist behind, a colored person behind an illustration in a corporation or in organizations? Even here, we can actually make a quick glance on social media, LinkedIn and all those things. Do you think that this is also impacting a representation in that aspect as well?
So like by corporates using
Exactly.
like me, do you think that that would be an impact?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, every little helps. That's the way I see it. Because right now, if I'm being honest, most of my business comes from the UK still, or other countries, simply because they're just a lot more accessible to me. And I do think, in a way, language, right? Like, I mean, I think when you were talking about the sort of like disabled, meant it made me think of this infographic. It came into my mind because there was um debate or some drama that went on the internet, where a lady was saying how when she was holding her child she can't play video games, which you now have insight into the kind of drama that I'm looking into. And actually that technically that is a temporary disablement, not necessarily that she has a child, but if her hands are physically taken up, then obviously she can't do as much. And it just made me think, language, not being able to communicate what exactly you're trying to say, is such a huge like barrier. Over in Sweden, I mean, I'm sure you can agree, you can get around with English, no problem. But I think that having, the being fluent in the language will give you that upper edge, because some people, even though they can speak English, might not necessarily want to. Especially if they're maybe like higher up or older, an older demographic. Typically the kids, they want to speak to you in English because they're watching YouTube and whatever. But the older folk, rural folk, might not necessarily want to speak to you in English, or don't feel super confident or something like that. So I think, and yes, I do speak a bit of Swedish. But I'm still not, I think, at a place where I can confidently get across everything I'm trying to say, or my expertise, or
So
things like
relatable.
that. Yeah, right. In my business. And so, I saw this quote by what's that lady's name? She's a really famous actress and from Colombia, I believe. And she was like, I am so smart in my home language. I'm so smart in my native tongue.
Yeah.
And that's how it feels sometimes. It's just like speaking in Swedish, I feel like me, Tarzan, you, Jane. I can't get it out.
Yes.
Yeah, I do think, being given a bit more of a just a sort of like stepping stone into that field, a little bit more openness to talk to people who you don't know, right? That would be so great. Yeah, I think that would really, really help.
Because I remember that when we met at the who said we were the only women of color in the
Yeah, right.
And I was like, oh, I just saw it.
I see you.
Right?
I see you.
But it is so real. Well, of course, shout outs to them. They try to do almost everything in English, so that is quite inclusive in that way. But when it comes to the mainstream income earning organizations and corporations where someone can practice their expertise and bring their experiences on board for growth, personal growth, organizational growth, and even to make a statement of the diverse representations and inclusion, let alone to have other people in there as a supporting or allies to make a belonging atmosphere.
Yeah.
The language poses as I don't know, it's such a problem. And but of course, you want to do what Swedes do, or you want to live in Sweden, you have to do what the Swedes do, and the language is such paramount. It's something that we can, I don't know when it's going to be an adjustment in that situation, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere soon. It doesn't seem to be going anywhere soon. And when you check on different platforms, a lot of people who are not even like a women of color or people of color, let me put it that way, a lot of people have the same point of references: language barrier, years of experiences, talents just being washed down,
right,
boiling down to the language barrier. Yes. But as people, or as people, how do you think that we could? How do you think we could just jump the barrier? It is not easy, which of course we all know it is not easy. But how could we even just go past the immediate barriers, or to make to feel, not to lose the sense of confidence, because it's very easy to lose it and to just shut down and shrink.
Yeah.
It is so easy. Yeah. So how do you think that these things could be looked into, or we could counter?
Wow. I mean,
on their own,
Yeah. I just want to say it's so funny that you sort of posed this question and like the light has finally come back on again, like an idea. But yeah, really interesting question. I think more groups, more sort of like, different cultural groups. I mean, right now in Sweden, like one of the, I think, wonderful things that they're doing is that they've made it so wonderfully accessible for Somalian refugees in this country. And there's so much support. You can go on like so many web pages and it's translated to, of course, you can get it in English base, but
Right.
you also get it in Somalian, you get it in various other languages. And it's just great because these people who had to flee their country are able to settle here, and there are so many programs to help them get into the system.
Exactly.
Like, I'm looking on Arbetsförmedlingen right now just for an extra source of income. And there's like this thing that is it's a program for new in Sweden.
Yeah.
And there's different requirements for it, but it seems that it's more sort of a lot of like the jobs that are posted that sort of take part with this program are sort of more geared towards maybe Somalian refugees, which is fantastic. It would be fabulous if there
I
was
like that word, fabulous.
yeah, it would be fabulous if it was a little bit more open to people who are new in Sweden, who have migrated there, who aren't Somalian refugees. Not necessarily because, oh yeah, our situation is as dire, but in some cases it is. Some
Yes.
people have moved because, well, they expected life would be better in Sweden. Like, I always knew I wanted to move to Sweden. It would be nice to be integrated a little bit more, given a little bit more, because it's already so difficult trying to get set up here. The system is like clockwork when you're in the system. When you're out of the system, it is very irritating. There are forms you have to fill, there's a lot of waiting time, there's letters and this and that, and everything is offline, and it takes so much longer. It would just be nice to be sort of like having more of these groups of just like people that have come from other countries who are looking for work opportunities that are up to date.
Yeah.
Not something that's just been, updated.
Educated, highly educated for that matter.
Oh my gosh. Like some of these things, and it's just like, this would be so perfect. Oh, it was updated 2 years ago. It's like just more opportunities. And when it comes to networking, why does the bar have to always be so highly financial? This is like people's source of income, like you say. It is currency, being able to network, being able to have those connections. So it would just be nice to have more of those opportunities,
Exactly.
as a starting point.
Yeah.
Then we can work it out.
Yes, exactly. I totally agree with you. And with this standpoint of the reference to the Somali refugees, it takes my mind to a book that I have invested in, and I want to invite you to the book circle. But it's a representation. It's a direct representation of women of color migrating into Sweden. So it's the in every mirror she's black. I don't know if you have seen that book before, or I could send it over to you.
Yeah, please do. That sounds interesting.
It's written by Lola Sankala Orchestrum. Yes, she's originally Nigerian, but this is the life of people of color, especially women of color who have migrated. It's about like three groups of women. One educated, one in the creative and fashion and model industry, and now migrated into Sweden. And then there's another one who is a Somalian refugee who has migrated to Sweden as a refugee, and also another person who has also come in to start or to work in the corporate organization in Sweden, and it is such a telling experience. You live it, you feel the storyline.
Yeah.
And when you get into it, you realize, this is me. I find myself in this category. I find myself in this category, So it talks more about how the networking system also could be much welcoming.
Yeah.
And quite allow good integration, because right now the word is integrate, because you cannot do it on your own. As an individual, you try your best, you try to knock on doors, but the doors you knock on, they seem to be shut in your face.
Yeah, if they're even opened in the first place.
Exactly. And this is a story, or this is coming from a person, or these women from different backgrounds, as I said. You're not just coming as to be a burden.
Yeah, right.
Society. You want to work, you want to contribute, because I believe that even as an individual, we are diverse on our own. So why is it so difficult, or why would it be such a challenge for different groups of people with different colors coming into one space to really highlight the diverse angles? Of course, we are not saying that everything is perfect, everything should be taken, but at least I believe that the more the colors, or the more the representation, the better the party gets. This is my thinking.
Yeah.
This is my thinking, because as an individual, even when you take your different parts of your body, without one part, you cannot work, adequately or effectively. So imagine different representations or different groups of people with different academic, social, cultural backgrounds and experiences, for that matter, coming with their hands. This would be really, really good. And this point of the integration is a very strong point. I want to appreciate that very much. But for you as a person, how do you get by? How do you get by? Of course, I know you do. You try your best to go to network events, but how have you gotten by all this while?
Honestly, by going to my international networking events, by still networking in the UK, by people referring me and things like that. Of course, referrals are the best source of business. But yeah, that is really how I do it, just by networking in the UK. Because over here, I'm still trying to work out where I can squeeze myself in,
right?
Where I'm actually, able to just get my foot through the door. So, yeah, right now I'm still navigating.
It's okay to navigate. It is. I appreciate the honesty and the authenticity, and everyone can relate to that. I have a word that dropped to me. It says, if you want to understand it, live in their space. Because you cannot understand. If you were living in UK, you could know Sweden for a distance, but now you live in the space, you now understand. So why can't we are just urging other people who are not like us, who have migrated, who are darker skin like us, to also live in our space? How do you advise people to live in your space? Or
so for me, the saving grace is that I have like spaces that I go to regularly. Like, for instance, I have a really fun and diverse church, which is a very, it's nice to be in such a diverse space, where it is an English service. So that is quite nice of just like, okay, I don't have to put on a different brain, you
Yeah,
know. And then I have a choir that I'm a part of where they do speak Swedish, which is great because I get to practice my Swedish.
exactly.
But they're very like, yeah, crazy, and I love that. Just a little sort of like dose of, okay, it's not all keep to yourself.
Yes,
Here's a group of just very people.
exactly. Yeah.
I need my dose of crazy, or are
Yes, you do. I need my dose of crazy. Oh,
you know?
girl, that's really wonderful. Crazy kind of wonderful.
Exactly. It's like, you come to Sweden and I've literally thought, oh my gosh, no one's going to talk to me. No one talks. But having those little doses of just like, okay, have some other culture, have some just,
Exactly.
some craziness. Um, but really, yeah, having those groups. I mean, I got to live here for a year previously to me moving here permanently
Right.
when I was doing my gap year at university.
Mm.
Um, and I got to build a few sort of like connections
Right.
there since I was working in Stockholm.
Mm-hmm.
I can honestly say that since the pandemic, that all just went to pot, and I haven't been in contact with practically anybody
Right.
since that, because that totally bulldozed everything. So I was kind of hoping that those connections I was making, I'd be able to sort of pick up on and go back. But networking events in Stockholm suddenly just disappeared. So yeah, I'm kind of starting from scratch on that point, but definitely getting with those groups.
Right.
SFE,
Mm.
it's sometimes it's an absolute headache, but it did genuinely help me with my Swedish. But I don't think anything helps you nearly as much as actually being part of the community, talking to people,
Exactly.
practicing your Swedish,
Exactly.
practice getting your coffee in Swedish, and
Mhm.
freeze when they ask you something that's outside of your routine.
Mhm.
Um, put yourself in those situations that might be a bit uncomfortable, which I'm sort of learning to do now. Because it is very intimidating being in a new culture with a new language and a new way of life and being a Black woman.
And less crazy.
Take your time, you'll get there.
Yes. Wow. Okay, Chanel, this has been so great.
Yeah, really
We
enjoyed
can
it.
go on and on and on and on and on. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for your time and sharing. You spoke about the integration, which is really important because this is giving the discussion about the diversity, the equity, and the belonging. But just one last question that I want to ask about. For
Yeah.
you, how do you express? How does your illustrations express your story or your background? Now, when we see this, it's like, whoa, this has a strong thing. You can say, oh, this is Chanel. Yeah. So how does it represent your background?
Oh, well, I just have to say, you're just gonna have to look at it and see for yourself. But
Right.
also, I mean, right now I have the privilege to work on a graphic novel, which is revolving around Black history for a
Congratulations.
yeah, we finally finished our second draft.
Oh, you need your dose of crazy around that.
I cannot wait to just share it with everyone.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
so yeah,
Wow.
I'm super duper excited about that. And I think it's so on the nose for what we were talking
Great.
about.
Oh,
Yeah, but it's awesome. And I get to work with people who genuinely are passionate about what they do, and that
exactly.
makes me passionate. Um,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, I could literally do illustrations on just boring stuff, but if
Mm.
the person on the other side is passionate about it, it's like, yeah, go ahead, quantum
Yeah. Yeah.
physics, like,
You need that.
yeah, just the
You
passion.
do. Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, like
Wow.
it's a very expressive job, so
It is. Wow. It's so interesting that for a personality like you ends up with a very calm Swedish natured person.
right,
We
it's yin and
understand.
yang.
Yeah, they need that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Oh
Wow,
gosh.
great, great, great. So is there something else that you would want to share? Well, you also spoke about the Abed Femelengen, you also spoke about the New in Sweden program. Something else in general, just for as a heads up for someone else who is just coming in.
Oh my gosh, there are a few things that have been helpful, but I think, yeah, finding that community,
Right.
like that was one of the first things I did as soon as sort of lockdown was, well, it wasn't really a lockdown over here, as you know, but when things started getting back to normal,
Right.
it was like, okay, I need something right now, get me out of this house.
Yes.
You know, if you can, even if it's you going out into the library is free,
Yeah,
you
very
know,
much.
and they
You
have
did like
events.
the library.
Yeah, like the Uppsala library at least is wonderful.
Yes, and the staff are so welcoming.
Yeah,
They
that would
are.
be my what's the word? Suggestion, because they do
Right.
have like a language caps.
Mm,
You can go there, you can practice your Swedish, you can
right.
exchange your language, like language exchange, språk exchange. That's really, really great. So that would be my suggestion for sure.
Exactly. I relate with you a lot because not, of course, from an ethnic or racial perspective, but because I am a designer and I know how illustrators play a very vital role in the art of fashion. I wasn't engaging myself too much with illustrations. I could just do things off from my head, but I could appreciate how illustrators actually bring my mind to the paper
Yeah.
when I am busy running on the different things. So I have a very strong correlation or understanding what you are doing, and let's hope for more integration and better things as the
Yes.
years go by. But it is important to really have this discussion or to work on practical things and talk
Yeah.
about it every now and then. We are not just making things up. This is real life.
It's real.
Yes, it is like good. So we would like to follow you on LinkedIn. If
Uh-huh.
you
Thank
want
you.
to give your LinkedIn handle, we could
Yes.
connect with you.
Fabulous. Yes, it's Chanel Richardson. It's simply that.
Okay.
Exactly how you see it. You'll be able to find my LinkedIn there. And I do have, of course, website,
Mm.
Shandwich dash artist. So Shandwich, like sandwich, but with a H in there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I'm on Twitch as well if you want to watch me actually do my art in real time.
Oh,
It's Twitch TV underscore Sandwich dash artist.
perfect.
Yes.
You are really international and you are very technologically advanced. I must say that.
What can I say? What can I
Oh,
say?
great, great, great. Okay. Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. So
Yeah, thank you.
let's reconnect again. I mean, touch base on this again.
Yes, absolutely. It would be great. It would be great.
Great, great, great. See you around soon.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.